Hi, and welcome to our webinar on Jim2 maintenance. A common thing I hear when I talk to customers is that they don't know what they don't know. And as such, we'll cover each topic from the basics to advanced usage to make sure that you're all fully informed of each section. I also wanted to let you know that these webinars and other short informational videos are available in our Learning Centre. You can find this on our website by going to jim2.com.au, highlighting resources, and then clicking Learning Centre. Finally, before we get started, I wanted to thank everyone that filled out the survey ahead of this webinar. It was great to see what our customer base wanted to know more about on the Jim2 task list. I think we've got most of what was asked covered in today's webinar, actually. So let's start on today's topic, Jim2 and maintenance. Well, it's that time of year again. The financial year is ending for many of our businesses, so we wanted to look at what you can be doing in terms of Jim2 maintenance to help make this time of year as smooth as possible. We wanted to approach it a little bit differently this year, as we have existing webinars that already go over end of financial year tasks. So today, I'll bring Ian and Rose in to discuss the different parts of the Jim2 task list, why they're important, and how they can be performed. G'day, Ian and Rose. Thanks for joining me for the full webinar today.
Thanks, Ash.
One other
Thank you.
difference, you're welcome. One other difference today is that the Q&A will be available throughout the webinar, as we wanted to keep questions in the context of the discussion points. So we'll be doing our very best to keep an eye on the questions coming in and answering them as they come in, as well as going over the information. Okay, so we'll be using the generic Jim2 task list that customers may be familiar with to cover all the tasks associated with each time period. Let's start with daily. Ian, we have listed a number of tasks in the daily section. Can you give some detail on why they're included?
Look, I think that firstly, when we talk about all the tasks today, this isn't brain surgery. We're just talking about maintenance of things. So when we have these different points that we'll see, and we'll talk a little bit about some of them, they really are relevant to your own business and how they apply in your space. The fact that it's not brain surgery, we're just going to understand that everyone can use Jim2 to the level that we're talking about today. The other thing too that I think is important before we break into these different groups, these different sections of task list, is Jim2 is all about trust. So unless things that are in it are correct, then people start to lose trust. And when they lose trust, then you have people working outside the system. So some of the maintenance tasks we're going to talk about today may not influence the accounting, may not influence the workflow, but what they might do is just bed down that you don't have things in there that confuse people or things in there that need to be continually rectified. So as we look at this list that's in front of us and we think about how does this apply, particularly as we get closer to our sort of end of year processes, I guess it's things like, what's the legitimacy of the card files that are in there? Do we have card files that we no longer trade with, that we don't want our staff to be involved with or be confused by? So cleaning them up with things like moving them across to an inactive status or an inactive state, looking at quotes, cleaning them up to make sure that we reject the quotes that really haven't been accepted, or at least to try and keep that quote list that you're working on to be current. With jobs, making sure that we invoice as many as we can. And of course, at the end of financial year, that's particularly important. We need to move stock out of our systems. And it's important that you're not having to deal with jobs that don't apply anymore. So those small things that you can do every day and you're already probably doing are really important. In relation to things like purchase orders, making sure that you're chasing up the received ones and moving them to finish is very important. That is about stock valuation, and that is also about your creditor liability. So you really want to make sure you can keep on top of those and your expenses. Those are the sort of little things we're going to talk about today. Just the little maintenance things that are important.
Sure. We've hit on a pretty wide variety of topics there. I'm sure that we'll come back to a few of them. I guess sort of looking at why these things should be maintained daily, I guess we are talking about the stock valuations. We are talking about the knowledge of what creditors, what we owe creditors, and what is owed to us. What are we talking about in a practical sense, though, when we're saying that these things should be maintained daily?
Okay, well, everybody has a role to play. When you're a user of Jim2, then you all have different responsibilities, but equally, you're sharing that information with other people. So to keep it correct is up to your own position, I guess. I do like the point that we're talking about daily here because these are small things that you just keep on top of all the time. The fact that Jim2 is a live database means things like stock valuation is live. As you finish a purchase order, that value is going through to your balance sheet and your COGS. So it's important to stay on top of those things so that at any time you look at your database, it's actually correct. And that's a big benefit because with other systems that potentially batch this information and only pass it over at the end of a day or the end of a week, it's not the same situation as you could look at with Jim right now. Keeping it nicely maintained every day also means you're not doing end of year cleanups on these things. They're just ready. They're just right.
Not having to jump in and do a whole bunch of cleanup and make a lot of card piles inactive, or closing a lot of quotes that may have been closed, could have been closed a month ago, or 2, 3.
Well, that's correct. And I think part of the other things that happen is a lot of this information is what you might call contemporary. It is important to know about it when it's happening. So, for example, when we talk about Tilrex, we would encourage all our customers who have the retail license who are doing till reconciliations to be doing them every day, not to be waiting and trying to do them at the end of a week. It's much easier to try and discover a variance when you do it on a daily basis than it will be to think about something that happened 5 days ago. So the timeliness or contemporary element here is really important.
Speaking of that timeliness and the Tilrex in particular, or banking, or any of these tasks that we need to repeat regularly, is there a way that we can set a reminder to pop at a certain time each day to help us stay on top?
If you need to use a reminder system, then obviously scheduling is in play, and you could use what we call to-dos. To-dos mean that they're not necessarily job-related tasks, but they're activities that you want scheduling to put a reminder in front of you at a given time, whether that be a recurring reminder, as in daily, or even if it was something that you wanted to do on a weekly or monthly. So that skill that you're talking about, using scheduling, setting to-dos, could work for you in each of these different sections: daily, weekly, monthly, etc.
Fantastic. We've got our first question in. I want to jump right on top of it. Isn't purchase order stock counted in Jim2 at the received status, just not the accounts payable side? That's a good question. I think there can be some confusion about the statuses on purchase orders. So if you could speak to that, Ian.
Yeah, sure. And look, I noticed that the question is saying just not the accounts payable side. So when we receive a purchase order, and we're talking about, in this case, depleting or special stock in particular, we're actually saying that we have that stock in our inventory system that's available for you to sell or for you to utilize. What we're saying then is it's not actually valued at that point, which means that your balance sheet doesn't understand the value of the purchase order because you haven't received a tax invoice, or at least you haven't finished it, which would indicate that you've received a tax invoice. So keeping them cleaned up as best as possible, chasing invoices is, I guess, where I'm coming from. I know Rose and I have both had many circumstances where customers are talking to us about closing a year from 11 months ago, for example, and not having some of those purchase orders moved to finish yet. So that's been 11 months that they haven't got to a point where they could clarify the cost pricing through a tax invoice. In fact, just this morning, I had a conversation with a client in exactly that position. So it's just keeping on top of them as often as you can to make sure that you're not having these purchase orders sit on received for that long.
Fantastic. And just finally on our day-to-day tasks, unless there's some more questions come in, how do you stay on top of your day-to-day tasking? And I know we use Jim internally in Happen as well. What do you find useful?
Okay, well, geez, I'm so glad you asked, Ash. Uh, in terms of managing all the things that go on in a business, obviously task or lists of things to be looked at is the importance here. So there are two ways that I deal with that. Firstly, of course, there's the lists that I like to keep for myself, which I can create. So in that case, I'm creating my user lists. Excuse me, I may be pinning them, refreshing them, putting a little timer on them, and making sure they're named correctly. So it's a really basic skill. I said this wouldn't be brain surgery today. Those sort of lists are important. But the other thing that I'm really liking in version 4.5 is the access to the dashboards where we can actually have the dashboards giving us the list availability. So I can create more lists. I can make them what we call published lists, but in fact not have to show them in my nav tree, but in fact just access them from a dashboard widget. And that's been really, really helpful. It also means that I have lists that other people can see. I have dashboards that other people can share. And by clicking on the widgets, they can display the information that I'm looking for. My screen isn't so busy because I only need to go to the dashboard tab in order to find the applicable widget and therefore the information that I need.
I'm not even sure if there is a limit on the amount of widgets that you can add to a dashboard. I'm sure there is one in a practical sense, but I've certainly seen some of our internal dashboards have certainly over 30 different lists being populated on the dashboard at a single time. It's yeah, it's quite useful. I completely agree.
Well, one of the great things about the dashboards is that you can create different dashboards. So you don't have to have all your widgets in one space. You can have a dashboard that relates to the accounting type of widgets, for example, and others that might relate to the job related widgets. So you can move around and see different things through different tabs in your dashboard screen.
Just more of a comment there that yes, you can have multiple dashboards, and there may be some things we can do around the security to make it a bit easier for regular users to create. That would come back to the security settings that you've got there. Yeah. Let's move on to some weekly tasks. Ian, maybe we can go over a few whys for the weekly tasks.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the follow-ups are quite obvious, and I think they just come from the dailies that we spoke about. Things like your e-business if you have e-business flows in Jim2, so there we're talking about e-business transactions such as orders coming in or to be moving things out. It's worthwhile checking your e-business queues to make sure nothing's being held up. Those transactions, for example, that where an order may be coming into the system, but it hasn't resulted in a job being created in Jim, it's necessary to check those to make sure something's not holding them up. As far as packaging, manufacturing is concerned, it's really about process. It's about, are we getting on and doing these things and completing the processes in a timely manner? A manufacturing review, for example, could include looking at the jobs that are for making something and then checking that the quality is there and checking that they actually did get to a point where they were manufactured. A manufacturing job that stalls actually results in no additional stock. So you do need to spend your time looking at that and checking that it's correct. Part of a manufacturing review, by the way, should also include reviewing the labour used in the process of that manufacture, particularly where labour becomes part of the asset value. Now, if you'd like more information about that, feel free to contact the support team. We can talk on and on about manufacturing processes. From a stock procurement point of view, many of our clients would use stock procurement as one of the three methods of raising purchase orders. And again, it's worthwhile checking on stock procurement to see if there's a continual flow of requirement. In other words, when you run it, every day it just keeps asking for stock. It could be that your stock procurement process is not resulting in an order. I mean by that you might see that you should order it, but maybe you didn't yesterday, so you need to today. It's again a review of process. Recording credit card information excuse me, with result to expenses or checkbook entries. So we have company credit cards and they're being used in by the various members of your teams, and making sure we're reconciling the expenditure against those. Of course, the debtors management, important to the point of not just looking at the fact that the money's coming in, but who are the people that we need to continue to follow up. So let's come back again. No brain surgery, normal tasks, just different users in the business doing it. Our bank reconciliation process, which I notice we've got a spelling mistake with, is all about being able to use things like our bank feeds for those customers who are using that service, or alternately getting the information and manually doing the bank recs on a regular basis. And again, if you're doing it at least weekly, you're cutting a lot of the problems that you'll get if you try to do it monthly. Just a month's too far in between.
That makes perfect sense. It's certainly easier to remember something that happened this week rather than earlier in the month, and those circumstances can really dictate the actions you take around some of these things, right?
Yes. I mean, overview that Jim is giving you is one thing, but to take action to ensure the practices are improved is really what we're talking about here. I mean, if we move further down and we talk more about the money, the petty cash, for example, or the payroll journals and the general journals, they're all timely elements. Live database, complete the transactions, get the reporting in the days when it exists, when it's happened.
We've had a question pop in that's speaking to scripts that could be useful in and around maintenance. Now, I know that there is certain customers have certain requirements, and so we'll create a customization. Is there much opportunity to surface these more publicly so that if they're useful for other businesses that they might make sense, or do we find that there's not actually that much crossover between different businesses' requirements?
Well, firstly, let me say that unless we know there's a requirement for it, we don't know. If we come back to what you like to say, Ash, we don't know what we don't know.
Don't know what we
so
don't know.
The requests that we have for custom scripting has resulted in some scripts that may indeed work for other people. We simply don't necessarily know that that's something that they require. I will say, though, that custom scripting in the main is addressing the issue of the customer's request. It's not trying to be generic. So when we do that work, we're talking to that client about what they need. That said, we are very keen for Happen User Voice to be used to ask us questions about other ways to do things. So, for example, I don't mean that in a support way, I mean in a feature way. Going into Happen User Voice and saying we would like some way of being able to clear all our old quotes is a great suggestion to go into Happen User Voice. It would, I would believe, potentially attract votes, but we would then be able to do some more research with those contributors to find out exactly what it is they would like to do.
So I guess we're talking about the difference between making something that works for everyone rather than making something that works for an individual business.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the individual requests we've had, and I'm sure that many of our customers in the webinar today have asked us for individual customizations at some stage, whether that be reports or whether it be scripting. They have their needs and their requirements, and those needs and requirements may be completely different or just very minorly different from others. But the point is difference.
Right.
If we can know more about what the clients are after, then we have a better chance of either adding it as a standard feature for all customers or specifically for them.
Fantastic. So what are some of the benefits of using, say, stock procurement over just putting in orders as things come up?
Well, in the process of trust, one of the things that we're very, very happy with Jim2 is the inventory management and trust in it. So if a customer, for example, was to ring in and request something in one of our customers' databases, it'll go into a job and the procurement sessions should then pick that up as a requirement, as potentially would auto create also do the same. Now, keep in mind, there are 3 different ways to order. And each of those ways has a difference about it. So we're expecting people to use all three. Stock procurement is about keeping on top of your shelf requirements as well as your customer demand for depleting stock. So running it every day means you're sort of staying on top of things continually, and you're not needing to do an auto create function to pick up the depleting requirements. When we talk about using auto create purchase order, that's great for keeping up with customer specific things such as special stock, where you're trying to make sure that you're buying stock specifically for that job and it's not stuff that's going to go, for example, onto a shelf. And then we've got add PO, because neither auto create nor stock procurement would adequately handle something like a non-depleting purchase order. A non-depleting purchase order, so that stock that is non-depleting, is stuff that we don't care about. And as a result, you need to use a manual order. The other thing too is, every now and then, I guess you want to ignore what the system's telling you. And this is where I get concerned about people and job management. Sometimes you'll look at the system and it'll be saying something, but you won't think that's right. And that's why things like stock procurement are handy to look at. Why auto create is handy to look at, because then you might be finding the source of the request is wrong. That is, the job is wrong, and that you can go back and rectify that.
Perfect. Now, I might get ruffle some feathers by mentioning it, but Jim2 doesn't have a payroll function. So why is it on the Jim2 task list?
Well, obviously, as a live database and as something that runs both balance sheet and P&L reporting, you do need your payroll journals to be entered. We need to tell Jim2 as to what your exposure is in terms of liability to super, to income tax payments. You also need to record the actual expenses of these, and keep your bank account accurate. So a payroll journal or a series of payroll journals are particularly important, and they should be timely. Again, live database. So when I'm looking at my balance sheet and my P&L, I want to see these liabilities and expenses. If you don't do your payroll journals on a regular basis, again, you've got to go back and see whether you need to aggregate them from another system. For example, if you had 4 weekly periods and now you're going to do a monthly journal, there's a lot of work that has to be considered. Whereas you could use your payroll journals, use little features like Create Similar to try and make it simple for yourself to put that information in.
Makes sense. On to Fortnightly, we have return from customers or RFCs, as well as return to vendor or RTVs. What's involved in maintaining those, and why not just handle them as they progress?
Well, you should. So let's just say that, Ashley. We should maintain them as they progress. I think the issue here is catching the ones that aren't. Quite commonly with the return from customer, if it's not finished, as our customers are aware, if it's not finished, we actually don't have the process of either the accounting or the inventory management. So a return from customer could be added. However, it may be that the business is going to inspect the product before declaring that they'd accept it. If that's the case, we may have a return from customer sitting on booked status, for example. And if left alone, not reviewed, then it will stay unbooked, and then 3 weeks later, we don't actually know what the story is as far as that return is concerned. So it's just, all I've done with saying it's a fortnightly task is really saying, just have a quick look at your returns and see if they're up to date and they are timely. And exactly the same thing applies to your return to vendor. Again, we're talking about inventory management, but also accounting. So we want to make sure that things that are sent back are actually accounted for, and we're on top of those. Maybe they haven't been sent back, and in fact, you're preparing the return to vendor and they're still sitting in the warehouse. We need to get those things moving and either cancel the return or proceed to a finish status. And as far as your exchange rates are concerned, well, I think people who are serious with multi-currency are probably looking at their exchange rates on a daily basis. But again, it's just a catch up. If an exchange rate hasn't been changed in the last fortnight, then it should definitely be reviewed.
Fantastic. We have a question on dashboards. What century will we see stock lists added? Pleased to announce this century, in fact, if you're on the latest version of Jim2, you will have them available now. So yeah, jump in there and have a look. On to the monthly tasks, and we've got a few things to chat about here, but I wanted to actually start at the end. Why is it important to be closing the previous month, and how do we do it?
Okay. Well, closing months in Jim2 is quite simple, as we're aware. It's also simple to open them back up again if necessary. But like any accounting system, it's important to be able to say, I'm happy with where I've got to in that month, and I don't actually want to add additional journal entries to it. So closing a previous month, done through tools, options, and accounts, and the ability to simply tick that month to close it. Now, there are some security considerations to also take into account here, but that's the standard process. Now, one of the things about closing is it should be done in a timely manner. Some of our customers like to close as quickly as possible after the month is completed. Others are quite happy to wait for 2 or 3 weeks before they close it, just in case they need to do some documents that relate to that previous month. Others don't close at all, and that's definitely not something that we think you should be doing. We shouldn't be leaving the months open. It does allow you to use dates that are well in the past, and that would influence P&Ls and potentially balance sheet entries. So we should be closing them on a regular basis. As far as the rest of this list is concerned, the creditors management, definitely making sure that you're not impacting on your own credit record so that you are making the payments that you need to maintain your relationship with those vendors. Price review, stock review, very much about a very subjective thing in terms of what our customers do, how they like to price, whether there's a different way of calculating a sell price or a more effective way of doing it, whether their pricing is within the market space and that it's still competitive. Those sort of things is what we're suggesting. Just every month looking at the best sellers and seeing that they're in the right space there. The stock takes, I for one think that you should be stock taking daily, weekly. I know that those sites where
Surely not, Ian. That sounds like a big ask. Some of our clients have thousands of lines of SKUs.
They certainly do, and we're certainly not going to ask them to do it in one hit. And it's all about that cyclical nature and being able to split their stock codes into sessions that they can count in an effective and quick manner. When we talk about these sort of stock takes and doing them regularly, we're sort of saying let's either tag the stock with a non-report level group, allowing you to segregate it, or to use general ledger group type splits, whatever is appropriate in order to make sure you can regularly and quickly stock take. Now, quickly, I'm meaning not only count it and finish the stock take session, but also be able to go back and immediately review the stock adjustments that may have resulted from that stock take session. So many clients who I've implemented, for example, we've had discussions about what does that mean. A suggestion, for example, you take stock at 8 o'clock in the morning until 8:45. You're looking for 45 minutes of time to be able to count a small section of your business and to complete the process. For some of you, that's not possible. I understand. It's just an example. But it is important that you count what you need to count. You finish the session and you also finish the stock adjustment after review in the one process or one session, if you like, and then you'll be staying on top of your quantities of stock, also your value of stock.
Speaking of stock, we have had a question in, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to confirm with you. Do we have a min, max, and safety tool to better manage stock inventory? This is the stock procurement system we were talking about earlier, is it not?
Yeah, I think the stock procurement will handle a number of different elements with respect to the quantities that you want to hold in your business. And it can be impacted both by the demand, the historical demand of a product, or it could be static, as in you make your own decisions about how you want those things to work. But we have plenty of information about stock procurement available to our customers in the Jim2 help. And we're also very happy to assist you via support. So just contact us and we can give you some more information. Keeping it updated is important though. So there are always going to be questions about, well, how do I handle a seasonal product in terms of a stock procurement session? And we can talk to you about what some thoughts in relation to that. There are things to maintain though, things like lead times from vendors. We store that information against stock codes in the vendor tabs, and it can be really important to the stock procurement process. So feel free, reach out to support at Happen and we'll talk about it with you, or alternately F1 and look up stock procurement through Jim2 help.
Fantastic. So GST is probably a really good one to talk about here because some people do it monthly, some do it quarterly, and I guess that side of things is up to the business and what's right for them. But what's the easiest way to prepare for this reporting? Is it just about making sure your stock's set up with the correct GST codes? Is there common pitfalls that we come across?
Well, Rose, do you want to have a chat about this, or would you like me to talk about what I think? You'll have more the accountant's view, I have more the cowboy's view.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Okay. Well, clearly our GST sessions are based on tax codes on transactions, and in a lot of ways Jim makes it quite simple because the stock codes themselves have the applicable GST tax codes on them. If they're used appropriately, then we wouldn't think a GST session would have any drama with stock transactions. Probably the bigger drama occurs with payroll journals and understanding the different tax types and when to use them within things. I say payroll, but any general journal, and knowing how those tax codes impact on the on GST. There's also the element of timing, and that is our customers would be aware that if they don't include a transaction in a specific GST period, it will hold over to the next, and it will continue to sit there until it is handled. That's not a great way to handle GST. The GST should be reported according to the monthly or quarterly sessions as your business is required to do. Rose, do you have other reasoning for?
Oh, I also think that you should always reconcile. Some people forget to reconcile and then go on to the next month and then they get scared. So it's always important to get a reconciliation number. Yep, that's me.
Terrific. But again, anything that you have problems with as far as GST is concerned, please contact support at Happen. Rose is obviously talking to many of our clients about this. We also have, I can assist as well, and so too can Beck. So we have a number of people who can help you with specific questions about your GST sessions, your BAS, or in any of your accounting.
Fantastic. Taking a look at quarterly, again, we've got the GST, but then we've got some security reviews here. What sort of things should customers be looking out for when doing a security review?
Well, I think considering security settings is about thinking of this as what can people see and what can people do. And things change. People's roles change, people's responsibilities change, and it's worthwhile every now and then, we're saying quarterly, going back and seeing how individual users of Jim2 are listed in the security groups. Our customers will be familiar with the fact that you can be, a user can be a member of multiple security groups, and a security review may require you to go in and say, well, no, Rose should no longer be a member of that group, but we're happy with Rose's membership of numerous other groups. If you're not checking it, things will slip through. And examples that can occur here in email security is distraction. This is where people can see more than they actually need to see to do their jobs. The email security I'm talking about here is more in relation to things like which folders should they be able to see email in. And if there's a folder of email that Rose shouldn't see or shouldn't be distracted by, we should actually impact on that email security and stop that from happening.
Perfect. Thank you for that one. Moving on to annually, can you run us through a basic process for closing a financial year?
Sure. Our closed financial year tool, our wizard, is a great way for you to think about the things that you need to be concerned about. And I know that our customers ask us a lot of questions about that. When we talk about closing, yeah, this is great. This is a terrific slide. I mean, when we're talking about these features as you see them, some of them are controlled by the customer and some of them are controlled by Jim. But they clearly do show you the things that you need to dive into. And in fact, the very first one that we can see on the slide of no purchase orders on received was one that we spoke about a little earlier today. The idea of this is to ensure that you get things done and acknowledge the things that need to be completed before you can close that previous financial year. And for clarity, we're talking about the previous financial year, not the one we're in right now. So for those customers who haven't done that as yet, that means we're now 11 months, almost 12 months down the track since that year was completed, if it happened to be a 30 June. So we're expecting that you would have taken care of all these things to the point where closing is simple, not difficult.
So speaking on the current slide, can we put some years to what we're talking about here?
Sure.
The preparing phase would be the 23-24 financial year, and the closing year would then be the 22-23 financial year.
That's precisely what we're talking about. And Jim2 manages two concurrent financial years. That means that you can effectively have 24 months open that transactions can be put into. We've spoken today about closing months so that you don't accidentally put transactions into months that no longer apply. But if you get to the point where you haven't closed a June 30 ending 2022-2023 financial year, the red one, if you get to that point, then come Monday, you would need to either utilise what we call a global variable to allow Jim to keep trading, or you'll need to close that year to allow you to move forward on Monday. Now, here's where this preparing comes in. If you do everything as we're discussing it today, you're going to be very ready to close a year that finished 11 months ago. Very. If on Monday you do need to use the global variable function, we're very happy to talk to you about it, help you through it. It takes 2 seconds to do. But what it does is it opens the date ranges. That means you can use any date on any transaction, including in the future. So we're asking you not to use that. We're asking you to close last financial year.
So something that comes up quite regularly at this time of year is the idea of stock valuations. Why is it important this time of year, and why is it tricky for Jim to provide a stock valuation at any given point in time?
Sure. Well, at any given point in time, Jim's really good, as in it's a live database. So at that point in time, it will give you stock valuation.
Say 6 months ago.
I understand. There are estimate reports now for stock valuation in Jim2, but those estimates are just that. They are estimates. They're not accounting reports. So what the process says is, I would like to know what my stock valuation was back. Let's take your 6-month period. So let's go back, say, to the end of December. What Jim2 will certainly be able to do is tell you what the balance sheet values of stock were then. That's fine. That's recorded and kept. What it can't do is accurately work out exactly what each individual piece of stock was worth at that time on the 30th of December or 31st. So it's an estimate report that we produce, and it is available in Jim2 4.4 and 4.5. So it's sitting in the management report section. What we would like you to consider, though, is for those customers who are an on-premises license, is to set aside a database backup from the end of the year. So that means that we wanted you to last 30th of June, that is last year, to have backed up your database and set it aside so that it could be used to be restored if necessary in order to run some of this sort of live reporting. We'd encourage you to do exactly the same this weekend. Make sure that you have a backup set aside at the end of trade I mean, if you're not trading on Saturday and Sunday, then simply back it up on the end of Friday and have it set aside so that if necessary, it can be restored. Now, these backups we're talking about, by the way, are accounts only backups. It makes them smaller than the full backups. It makes it quicker to run, but they can be fully restored. So if you could just consider that, setting aside a backup as of the evening of Friday, if you're not trading on the weekend, or on Sunday evening. First thing Monday morning before you open would also work.
So that's for our on-premises customers.
Yes.
Obviously, we're in control of the cloud and the associated backups with that. Are we keeping customer backups from end of financial year, and how long for?
We are keeping them at the end of financial year. We've just currently working through some processes to reduce the amount of database backups that we hold, which is in relation to our exposure to any vulnerabilities of any chance of those databases having access. So we have an email template, which is probably the way to explain this to our customers, because there's so many different things that we do in relation to the number of copies of every backup we take on the cloud, the number of locations where we store it, and then the length of time that we store these. What I'll tell you today is that if a customer of ours would like to have a copy of their backup from the end of financial year for last end of June last year, 30th of June 2023, or this week, this end of June this week, simply request it from us and we will furnish you with that backup. Now, customers, you'll need to hold that backup file for yourself. We will furnish it. We will give it to you. If you're a cloud customer, of course, though, you're not running Jim on premises, so you wouldn't be able to open it in that circumstance. But if you needed to restore it, we would talk to you about how that would work. In the meantime, rest assured, we are holding them, we are storing them, and we are locating them in numerous places so that they can all be protected.
Okay, and I just want to make super clear, what we're talking about is we are keeping cloud client backups.
That is correct.
We do not have access to or are keeping on-premises backups whatsoever, just to be absolutely crystal.
Correct.
I do have another question. Should you also do a backup on the night after closing the year off? Dean, what we're actually talking about when we're closing the year off, as we showed in the previous slide here, we're actually talking about the year before the current year. So the majority of the work is going to be already completed within that section of time before closing it off. So I'm not sure. I mean, I love redundancy. I'll take a backup for absolutely everything if I can. So absolutely feel free. But in terms of a necessity, I'm not sure there's 100% a need for doing that.
I mean, all our customers would be scared about data loss, I'm sure.
100%,
as a result,
yeah.
They would, at the very, very least, we would be expecting that you have that you have daily backup scheduled through the Jim2 server if you're running your own on-premises license. So those backups, yep, Dean, nothing wrong with retaining them that way. We do retain every night backups, by the way, for you. And whilst there's a current clarification for those cloud customers to clarify how long those will be retained, that you can rest assured that your minimum daily backup that the cloud customers' databases are kept is 90 days. So I'm not talking about specific end of year. I'm just saying every daily backup we retain for at least 90 days. End of year we hold for much longer. So those are the considerations. But if you have any concerns or questions about cloud backups, please let us know and we'll clarify that for you. If you would like to request a copy of an end of year backup and you're a cloud customer, we will organise that for you. And if you are an on-premises customer, please understand you're responsible for your own backups. We can assist you if you have a problem with the actual setups in Jim2 server.
Fantastic. So I think we've covered everything, which is really the best practices of maintaining Jim2 over time. I'll thank you all for attending today. I'll leave some information on the screen about how you can get in touch with us, and also ask, is there any questions that anyone had that we didn't cover today?
Well,
We
we're
do
looking
love a
pretty
bit
good
of
there.
silence, don't we? That's okay. We might just have a quick chat before we sign everybody out. Now, this time of year is always incredibly busy for us. Of course, we're getting a lot of support questions. Is there something that people can expect from this time of year, or is there, do people need to be aware that we're quite busy and that it may take a little longer to get back?
Well, I think in the main, we've probably had I wouldn't say a smaller number, maybe just slight lessening of support requirements over the last couple of years at this time. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that we're providing a lot more information on our website about functionalities and requirements. Our Jim2 help has been added to dramatically. But also, I think that we've got this split of end of years. We have many companies now not finishing their year at the end of June, and so it's starting to apportion. In fact, our New Zealand customers are all ending at the end of March. So we're able to sort of have less of a demand. We're here. We're ready to answer your questions, either by using the phone numbers, as you can see, send us a support@happen.biz email, and of course use all the information that we prepare for you on jim2.com.au.
And will this presentation be available to view on our website? Yeah, absolutely will be. All of our webinars get uploaded to the Learning Centre, usually same day. It's not often that it would flow over to the next day, but there is a possibility. Also, with everyone that's registered, you'll also be sent the link to that recording. So keep an eye on your email for that one. And one more question, which was a session on actual database maintenance would be good. That may be coming from quite a technical place. And so, yeah, that might not be something that we can answer live, but certainly reach out to support and, make sure that we're aware of what your requirements are there so that we can, dive into that a little bit more. Okay, well, if there's no further questions, we'll sign off now. But of course, reach out to support and let us know if there is anything else that you wanted to know about Jim2 maintenance and end of financial year. Thank you all for attending, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, Ash. Thanks, Rose.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Ian. Thanks,
Bye.
Rose. Bye.